So the null modem and SCSI cables. We talked about the small computer systems interface, but we didn't talk about null modem yet. A null modem cable is used directly to connect two computers. It's kind of like a crossover switch in networking today, a crossover cable, excuse me, in networking today. And even that we know is auto-detected, so some of you may not have even heard of that. So the SCSI cable, the small computer systems interface, it's used to connect a variety of internal and external devices. So a null modem cable is just pin to pin. There's no switching or anything like that. It's just pin to pin on both ends of the cable. The SCSI cable was used to connect a variety of internal and external devices. It's a special cable. They were very expensive if they were long. Keyboard cables. Pin 1 is for clocking signals. Pin 2 is for keyboard data. Pin 3 is for a keyboard reset. 4 and 5 ground and 5 volts DC. So that's your power. Pins 4 and 5 are power. And pin 1 is a clocking signal, keyboard data, keyboard reset. Identifying cables and connectors. So we have a communication, a printer, a monitor, a game port, and a keyboard. Game ports were serial ports also. Cables and connectors. Troubleshooting cables. Always check the cables first if a device is having a problem. Always check for loose connections. It was very common. People would never climb down and look at their computers in the back and there was 1,000 wires and they were full of dust, and I've even seen rats in them. Oh, my computer smells. And I'm like, it smells. I'm thinking they fried a chip because chips stink when they fry. So I get over to this guy's house and he's got a dead rat in the computer. The rat got in there and he couldn't get out, and I guess he starved to death and just disintegrated in there. It was so nasty. And it definitely stunk. And then, so always check for loose connections. Check for bent or broken pins, which was common in serial ports. Do not force them. That's how you get bent and broken pins in the older systems. Check for worn or frayed cables. They can chafe, so they just gently rub, gently rub, gently rub until they wear a hole in them and start shorting out on something. Ensure that you're using the correct cable. Yeah, because what if you're using a null modem cable in place of a modem cable, right? A null modem versus a modem cable, that's important. So we had to have these old clunky cable testers that we carried everywhere. And avoid homemade cables. So that's a little bit true today, even for networking cables. Some of us may be better at it than others and trust ourselves more, but even then, if you get it just wrong, it can pull and cause all kinds of intermittent problems. So it's better to buy manufacturer-made cables. So summary of connectors, again, a lot of test questions from this section. DB9, DB25, used for serial and parallel port communications respectively. The 9-pin was for serial, the 25-pin for parallel port communications, right? RJ11 and 12 is standard telephone connectors. RJ11 is the really small, like the telephone, the old school, which nobody even knows what those look like today. The old school handsets that had the big bell on it and everything, the big box phone. Like your grandpa may still have around the house. And the RJ12 was just a different kind for that. And today we use the RJ45 network connectors. Those are current as of today. We had the PS2 Mini DIN, supports mouse scanners and some keyboards. You may see those around today. I actually see some keyboards that still come with those things, but nobody uses them. Everybody uses USB now. Centronics supports printers. Yes, Centronics supports printers. Remember the Centronics connector? Let's take a look at that. That's that top one, the big, giant, fat plug there. And then, let's see, USB supports a variety of peripheral devices. So yeah. And expansion buses are standardized connections for installing devices. This is true. Our COM ports and everything, it's all standardized. You get a few options, but not many. And you have to know what they are, which is why they make you still learn this stuff. And expansion buses have several architecture types. Expansion buses have several architecture types. That's true, right? We have the ISA, the EISA, the PCI. All devices require unique I/O addresses, input-output addresses, and IRQs and or DMA channels, right? Depending on the device. May not need a DMA channel, but it will need an IRQ and an I/O address, input-output address. Let's take a look at what those are, just to hammer that home. I/O addressing, where is it? Right here, COM1, 3F8. The I/O address would be 3F8. The IRQ is 4. Note that we're not doing DMA here, right? Where do we have DMA? Right here. We have DMA here, okay? Floppy disks, things like that. Expansion buses have several architecture types. We talked about that. All devices require unique I/O, COM port addresses, IRQs, and DMAs. Very important to understand that. IRQ conflicts cause most problems during installation of a new device. This was a big problem. I used to work with a lot of engineers. I'm not going to say my age, but it was a while back, relatively speaking. And so these guys tried to put all kinds of devices in these computers and 60 printers and plotters and everything else. So I had all these cards that they were asking me to put in here, and I'm like, I can't put all these cards in this computer, man. You know what I mean? You can have this one this week, but then when you're done with this plotter after this job, I've got to come back and put the other card in if you want to use your laser printer. You know, that's just the way it is. So it caused a lot of frustration and understanding. So, and some of the computers, the older computers, again, you're probably replacing them if you get these where you have to configure these things that we were talking about. You're not likely to see them today. So IRQ conflicts cause the problems. The COM ports are used for serial devices and LPT ports and are used for parallel devices. This is true, all kinds of stuff, microcontrollers. You'll get into all kinds of things if you're in the industrial environment. You will see this stuff if you're in an industrial environment. If you're going to work in plants and places like that, they still use a lot of custom built gear, and it will be configurable this way. Sometimes today they're starting to just buy the USB and put it on their boards and designs and then design all their custom stuff after. So as far as you're concerned, you're only going to be dealing with USB. If you're lucky, that's what you'll see. If not, then you may actually have to deal with some of this and understand this stuff. So it's still good that it's being taught to you as you may come across it. So, and you need to know it for the test. And I hate to say this, but I had to learn it, so you have to learn it. And it's important to identify cables and connectors. You need to know what you're looking at. Loose or poorly connected cables often cause a computer problem. So even though you're not using that device, it could mess up the computer, that intermittent connection. It might be causing an interrupt, messing with the computer. It's waiting for an interrupt but never gets data. And so there's a misconfiguration and you're noticing weird halting problems or something like that. It could be related to a loose cable even though it's not being used, right? So you've got a printer hooked up and it's not being used. So one of the very first things I do when I have a computer and somebody says, this thing's not working right, the first thing I'll do if I notice something weird when I get on it, I'll unplug everything that's not essential and then slowly start plugging things back in to see what causes the problem. And that's one of the first troubleshooting strategies that I'll do.